Mr. Baker may be right when he says that the president can govern as he wishes for the next couple of years. Gentlemen?
Certainly as far as the U.S. Senate is concerned. As far as the House is concerned, the picture is not quite so rosy for the White House or for the Republican Party. At the moment, we estimate that the Democrats, we don't estimate, we can tell you that the Democrats have made a net gain of 18 seats in the House. Democrats are leading in 16 of the seats that still remain to be decided, and Republicans are leading in 13 of those seats. So if you do some quick arithmetic, you will see that somewhere between 21 to 23 seats will have changed hands in favor of the Democrats. Charlie Gibson, that should make life very difficult for the administration.
I think so, Ted, and the ideological change within the House, I think, will be even more marked. This business of trying to divide up the House and the Senate ideologically is not an exact science by any matter of means. But we took every House candidate running this year and tried to classify them that way on how they stood on economic issues. And if you look at the old Congress, you would find that the conservatives, even though the Democrats were in control, the conservatives actually had a 19-seat majority. As a result of what is happening tonight, we now find that the liberals will have about a 40-seat majority in the new Congress. So we've talked a lot about whether the president's coalition will continue in the House. This would certainly indicate that it will be very hard to hold that coalition for the next 2 years.
But Charlie, it certainly does not seem likely that there would be any successful attempt in the Congress, certainly not in the Senate, and even in the House now, to try to do anything with the third year of the tax cut.
No. I don't even think an issue.
We couldn't get it past the Senate.
No.
And you could certainly never override a veto.
That's right. He needs much more than that. So it probably isn't all that much of a change then, except for the fact that Tip O'Neill is going to be emboldened and will have more forces at his disposal. We'll see what the charms of the great persuader, the great communicator will be as he begins to work his will or tries to work his will.
Well, if a president is popular, the Congress can't resist him all that far anyway. But in any case, that is the national election picture at 52 minutes after the hour.
Now, here's more from Tom Jarrow.
So what does all of this tonight mean to Ronald Reagan, the White House, and to presidential politics just a couple of years away? To examine that, first of all, let's look at what has happened tonight in terms of some of the races that have already been decided. In the United States Senate, ABC News has projected winners in all but one of the 33 Senate races, and we're going to show you here the names of many of those winners. The only race which is still not decided is in the state of Nevada, where Democratic Senator Howard Cannon, at the age of 70, faces a very tough challenge from Republican Chuck Heck. Republicans held on to 8. There are 8-vote majority in the Senate, 54 to 46 so far. Democrats so far have only picked up a net gain of 1 seat in the Senate. So the Senate, as far as the voting tonight, appears to remain solidly in Republican control. And over on the House side, let's take a look at some of the results as far as the House is concerned after we conclude the look at our Senate winners. Stennis in Mississippi, an example of a Democrat who at one time thought he might be in trouble, but he pulled it right through in very strong and flying colors. On the House side, the Democrats apparently have gained a net of something like 18 House seats, but with the so-called gypsy moths in the South, the conservative Democrats who vote Republican, there's some question about whether that will really hurt the president and his men when they go to Capitol Hill to do their legislative battles during the next 2 years. Standing by now on the White House, at the White House, is ABC's Barry Serafin. Barry, how does it shape up tonight as far as impact on the president and his men there?
Well, Tom, here at the White House, of course, they're trying to put the best face on things. And, of course, some of the late returns have given them a little more reason to be happy. One person here said a little while ago that they're a lot happier now than they were 2 hours ago when they looked at some of the early returns. They insist that they're not surprised that what we're seeing in the House, and that's really what we're talking about when we talk about changes on Capitol Hill, that what we're seeing up there is within the range of White House predictions, maybe toward the upper end of that range, in the neighborhood of 25 or 26, 27 Democrats picking up seats up there. they're insisting here that that means that the president will still have a coalition. He will still have a philosophical majority of Republicans plus conservative Democrats. Their math says that their coalition pool has shrunk from perhaps 269 to perhaps 245, but that the president can still pull that coalition together. At the same time, they go out of their way to say pull that coalition together on selected issues from time to time, that it's going to get a lot tougher, and it certainly is going to get a lot tougher. Democrats will be emboldened, and there's already a little talk floating around, quickly denied here at the White House, that this is now a lame duck president. They say not so.
How about as far as his personal appeal, his personal magnetism, his personal help to Republican candidates? He traveled a great deal. He spoke on their behalf. He put a lot of personal stake in races, such as the gubernatorial race in the state of Texas. How has he fared as a political figure out of tonight?
Well, Tom, I think it's important to note a couple of things. Ronald Reagan, especially in the final days of the campaign, went to states where the environment was friendly, mainly western states. He went to states where there were close races, where he thought, and his advisors thought, that his presence could make a positive difference. And the answer is, in some cases it did, and some it didn't. In Montana, Larry Williams lost his bid for the Senate. In New Mexico, Harrison Schmitt lost his Senate seat. On the other hand, we saw Malcolm Wallop reelected in Wyoming, and Orrin Hatch in Utah. In the East, we saw Millicent Fenwick lose in New Jersey, so it's a mixed thing. It clearly does not indicate that his presence made a positive difference in all those races.
Barry, thank you very much. And we'll have more of ABC News election coverage in just a moment.
Primetime football's back. American Hero, Friday at 9, 8 Central and Mountain.
1/4 of the world lives with hunger. They're looking to the rest of us for help.
Please don't turn away from me. You're the caring one I need. With your help, I know I'll grow. You will give me hope.
Send your contribution to the Interfaith Hunger Appeal, P.O. Box 1000, New York 10150.
With your help,
You are the hope of the hungry. Please give.
In the state of Arkansas, Bill Clinton has won the gubernatorial contest, and Bob Clark has a profile on the winning candidate.
Once the nation's youngest governor, Bill Clinton will get a second chance now to govern Arkansas, a state with worsening economic troubles. The youthful Clinton was on the fast track to political stardom when he was upset 2 years ago by the man he defeated tonight. Still only 36, the Ivy League-educated lawyer began his political career as his state's attorney general and moved into the governor's office when he was just 32. He drew heavy support again this year from young voters, but focused his campaign on the plight of the jobless and the elderly. With his comeback victory, he may become one of the Democrats' rising stars again.
And we'll continue with more ABC News election coverage in just a moment.
Thursday on 2020, Helen Gurley Brown reveals to Barbara Walters her secrets of how to catch a man.
If you only made love when you were in the mood, it might be rather seldom.
Plus, Geraldo Rivera investigates the FBI. Did agents create phony black extremists? Watch 2020 Thursday.
America. It's a great country. Protecting it is a great way of life. The United States Air Force. Find out how you can be part of it. Aim high. Air Force.
General Electric in Nashville, WNGE-TV. ABC News resumes its coverage of the 82 vote.
It's 1 o'clock in the East. We have most of it in hand. We have delivered it to you neatly wrapped. But we do have a few races left that are close and we are unable to call as of this moment. For example, two governor's races we are unable to call now. One of those, one is Illinois. Adlai Stevenson and Jim Thompson, the Republican. The figures, as you see, are very close. Too close for us to do any calling, so we aren't doing any now. And in Idaho, the figures are very close. Batt and Evans, nose to nose, 49, 51%, too close to call. Frank, you have a couple more.
Yes, there are two other governorships that have not yet been decided. The first is in Nebraska. Robert Carey waging a very strong battle against Governor Charles Stone, who was a candidate for re-election. Carey is the restaurant owner who lost a leg. He won the Congressional Medal of Honor in Vietnam and eventually joined the anti-war movement when he came back from the Pacific. But nevertheless, he's considered a conservative businessman in Nebraska, and he's giving Governor Charles Stone a very difficult race right now. It's too close to call. We also have the contest for governor of Alaska, and that is a three-way race, really, you might call it. Governor Jay Hammond decided not to go. He has a two-term limit anyway. And Tom Fink is the Democrat. Bill Sherfield is the governor or the Republican candidate. But there's also a Libertarian candidate in Alaska named Dick Randolph. And it'll be interesting to see how the Libertarians do there, because that's the state where the Libertarians got their highest percentage. In 1980, it was nearly 12%, 11.7% in the 1980 presidential election. So those two races, Nebraska and Alaska, we still are unable to make any projection on.
And in the House, we have similar problems in Illinois, Frank, as you, David, had with the gubernatorial race there. And the biggest of those problems is with Senate Minority Leader Bob Michael's race. That still has not been called. We have not been able to project it, although I'm told that Bob Michael is claiming victory. Maybe he knows more than we do about that. That's entirely possible. In fact, we're going to listen to the videotape right now of Bob Michael claiming victory.
Me out there. I'm sorry we left you waiting so long, but I guess it was no secret we were in a fight all along, and you knew that, we knew that, and so we can now very confidently declare we won it.
Well, he is confidently declaring it, as you heard. That's Bob Michael, but as I say, we have not yet been able to project it. And another race, too close for us to call, in Illinois is in the 20th Congressional District, and that's where 11-term Congressman Paul Findley is apparently having a very rough race run against him by Richard Durbin. This one is interesting because the Middle East has intervened in the Middle West. Congressman Findley, as you may or may not recall, met with Yasser Arafat, is regarded as being somewhat pro-PLO, and so a great deal of out-of-state money came into Illinois to support Richard Durbin. That has become one of the campaign issues there, as of course is unemployment. But that race is still too close to call. One that we are able to call in Illinois is in the 19th District, where Daniel Crane, the younger brother of Congressman Phil Crane, has won re-election. He's already been in the House for 2 terms. He's going into a 3rd term. He won that race against Democrat John Gwynn. And then we've got a California race, a very important one in the 5th Congressional District in California. Phil Burton, who is a 9-term congressman, has won re-election for a 10th term against Milton Marks, who, although he is a Republican, is described as being almost a Hubert Humphrey double in terms of enthusiasm. But Phil Burton became important because he was, in many ways, the brains behind redistricting in California. In some regards, the gerrymandering out there was as outrageous as anywhere in the country. and Phil Burton deliberately gave away a part of his district to a neighboring district in which his brother, John Burton, was running for re-election. And then John Burton dropped out of the race, and Phil Burton was in trouble, but apparently not so much trouble that he wasn't able to pull it out at the last minute.
Well, there is, shall we say, there is some honor among politicians?
Well, at least...
Or is it the opposite?
At least between brothers.
Okay.
Well, at the time he drew it, he was quite confident, and his brother was too, that he was actually going to make the race. He decided later on, for personal reasons, to drop out of it. So it made it very difficult for him, particularly, as you said, Ted, because he was running against Milton Marks, a man who's been elected to the state legislature out there for years and years without ever really being identified as a Republican.
Our analysts are standing by, and they have a great deal more to work with than they have earlier in the evening. As I say, we have most of it now. 4 governors and 1 senator remaining undecided, and a few House seats. How many?
House seats, we've probably got about 45, I think, that are still undecided.
Well, some of those will remain undecided for a day or two. In the meantime, we want to go over and see what they have to say about all this. Sam Donaldson is with them. Sam?
Well, David, what we want to do is look ahead to 1984. Have we learned anything about the mood of the country or the potential candidates which would give us a clue as to the presidential race in 1984? Tom Wicker?
Yes, I think we have. I think that the parties have been returned more or less to their recent historical balance after this election. It's all very well for Jim Baker to come in and say correctly that they anticipated losing this many seats and so forth. The fact remains that they did lose them. And merely anticipating them doesn't change the fact that that Republican momentum, that realignment of the parties, all of the things that were talked about in '81 after President Reagan's election have been lost now, and the parties are back more or less to a relative balance that should give the Democrats, I think, encouragement for 1984. Now, the only thing that remains, and it's a very major factor, is that, of course, the White House is still in Republican hands, and I think we've seen tonight that incumbency, at least for senators, certainly proved to be an enormous advantage.
George Will, do you agree, or are we coming back to a point where the Democrats can succeed Ronald Reagan and recapture the presidency?
I think they have an uphill struggle on the basis of the returns tonight. In California, where 1/10 of the American electorate lives, Sam, the Republicans evidently have won the governorship and the Senate seat. In New York State, a man running for governor against a very attractive Democratic candidate, Mr. Cuomo, Mr. Lehrman ran in a way to the right of Ronald Reagan, saying that Reaganism in economics had been almost half-hearted.
And he lost.
He lost, but he was extremely competitive in what was 5 or 10 years ago viewed as the principal bastion of American liberalism. So it shows that you can conduct this kind of argument nationwide, from coast to coast. But more than that, Sam, there's been an open question, really, as to whether or not democratic governments can fight inflation. Anti-recessionary policies are a piece of cake. But the Thatcher government in Britain, the Reagan government in the United States have determinedly inflicted pain to try and wring inflation out of the system. And I think, on the basis of this outcome tonight, the public is more patient about this than I, frankly, would have thought possible.
Barbara Walters, does that tell us anything about whether President Reagan will run again, and if so, whether he'll be successful? And does it tell us anything about who might be able to challenge him?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because what I have here is some of the results of what the people themselves are saying. This is from our exit poll, and the question asked, should Reagan run again? And 40% of the people said yes, and 60% of the people said no. So when Jim Baker was here, we showed this to him and said, well, what do you think about this? And he said, well, this is the way it's been for several months, and this doesn't trouble us at all. I said, do you think it's age that makes people say this, or do you think it's policy? And he said, I think it's policy. Now, if you go a little further on and you ask about the different candidates, Reagan-Kennedy, the people seem to feel that Reagan would beat Kennedy 51-49. Reagan-Mondale, it would be 50-50.
Well, I think that's kind of amazing. Remember, Mr. Reagan won a landslide victory over Jimmy Carter in 1980. And it just seems to be more and more the evidence suggests that Mr. Carter lost that race decisively, rather than the country was really swinging to the right, George, in a way that would set a new majority for the next 10 or 20 years.
I'd have to dispute your use of the word landslide. 48.4% of those who voted for president in 1980 voted for someone other than Ronald Reagan, because you had votes for John Anderson.
Well, he managed to win by 10 million votes.
He managed to win by 10 million votes. He had a substantial margin of victory over Jimmy Carter, but it was only the 9th largest margin of victory in this century. So the electorate,
But you're making my point for me.
But look, what I'm saying is exactly that the American electorate tonight, as 2 years ago, is deeply conflicted. Let me give you one statistic about the Senate 2 years ago. We were worrying tonight about whether or not the Republicans could hold the Senate. Last year, when they gained 12 seats in the Senate, they could have lost 5 seats and hence control of the Senate if 34,000 votes in 5 states had changed. 34,000 votes.
Yes,
furthermore, while the Democrats were losing this enormous number of seats to the Republicans last year, they were getting 3 million more votes for their Senate candidates than the Republicans.
Okay, let me throw out this question to each one of you. White House aides, including Jim Baker, like to say the president's going to run again. They don't know that for certain. He hasn't announced, but their hunch is he'll run again. Do you think he will? Tom?
Yes, I think he'll run again. I have only recently come to that view, and tonight's election doesn't have much to do with it. I think he'll run again because Republicans are going to find that without him as a candidate, their prospects are going to be very dim, and they are likely to have a rip-snorting internal fight for the nomination.
Barbara?
I'd like to just switch a little bit because I began tonight and said that there might possibly be a female on the vice presidential ticket if there were a very strong showing tonight by women. And there wasn't. We had 2 women in the Senate to begin with, and we have 2 women now. And nor was there the big gender gap that we kept hearing about. It seems that there is more of a gender gap in presidential elections than we have seen tonight. So I'm mentioning this, not trying to duck your question.
But I'm going to come back to the question.
Well, only because I brought it up in the first place, and I think people deserve an answer at the end of the evening.
Okay, but what's the answer to my question?
Do I think he'll run again? Yes, unless Mrs. Reagan really doesn't want him to anymore, unless she's had it.
Well, everyone says she doesn't want him because they deny that.
Well, I think this would be one of the few relationships in which, you always hear the wife saying, whatever my husband wants is fine with me, and he says, thank you, dear. This might be one case where if she really didn't want it, he might not.
George will.
I think he'll run again. I think he is perhaps the most married man I know, but I think Mrs. Reagan is liking her job more and more. I think he likes the job. As John Kennedy said, the hours are pretty good and you can walk home to lunch.
And Hail to the Chief is a catchy tune.
Yes, but he said also that he didn't like living over the store. So.
Well, I agree with you. I think the president's going to run again, assuming his health holds up, and there's no reason at the moment to suggest it won't, and assuming that he does not suffer a major political disaster in the next 2 years. He didn't tonight.
Let's put you in the spot. Who's a Democratic candidate?
Well, I thought all along that John Glenn was someone to look at. He wasn't on the ballot in any sense tonight. People say he's colorless, but he's an authentic American hero, as George Will has pointed out. And I think Glenn is still a very major contender. Walter Mondale has got to learn to, well, not taking a lesson from me, but from someone else, stop talking as long as he does. And I just don't think Senator Kennedy is going to be the nominee of the party. And if he is, I don't think he's electable. So it comes back to Glenn, I suppose.
Could I go back to one subject we've spoken of only glancingly this evening, and that's money. I think that we really cannot dismiss the fact here tonight that the Republicans really had a great deal more money to spend in this election. You can't really measure it by the big spenders in particular races. George, for example, mentioned how well Lou Lehrman did in New York, and he certainly did, but he also spent an immense amount of money. Across the country, the Republicans outspent the Democrats by huge amounts. And I said earlier, I think they also have a greater technological expertise in politics, in modern politics today than the Democrats do. Now, I think those factors are going to be important again in 1984.
Yes, but money will certainly favor the Republicans in 1984, will it not?
Absolutely. I don't think there's any doubt of it. I see very little reason to expect that the circumstances that give the Republicans that money advantage now would change by 1984, if ever.
Well, okay, thanks to all of you. We've talked about 1982 and suggested that there's not been all of one side or the other, but sort of a mixed bag. Yet I persist in believing that Mr. Reagan is not going to be able to put together a coalition in the House, although Jim Baker came close to admitting it. He said it only on selective issues. Selective issues. And we've talked about 1984. We haven't nominated anyone, but I think we have some disagreement about which party is favored. Thank you all. Gentlemen?
Sam, thank you. Thank all of you. You know, we might add, this is not the best year in the history of the world to run for any political office above the level of assistant water commissioner, because if you do, you will be blamed for high unemployment, continuing recession, continuing inflation, expected to offer an answer to it, and to offer it within the space of a 30-second commercial. I think we might agree that anyone who tries to do that has got to be a little bit crazy. Ted?
Our coverage of the 82 vote will continue in 2 minutes.
Mother's Day.
I can't believe it's you.
Luis's friend falls for Chachi.
Do you think I'm trying to seduce you? You better back off, bucko.
Joni loves Chachi. Then Rossetti becomes a talk show hero, star of the family. And Muriel wants to repeat her wedding vows.
This isn't a sad moment.
Look who's standing next to you.
Too close for comfort. Then Sam has a problem.
A beginning impotent.
I could hit something.
It takes two.
Alcohol burns in more ways than one. Excessive drinking burns American business to the tune of $54 billion a year. But often an employer can provide referral to alcoholism counselors when job performance slips. Employer intervention can save lives and careers and makes good business sense. This message is from the Will Rogers Institute, White Plains, New York.
Every weekday, ABC News This Morning with Steve Bell and Kathleen Sullivan.
Politics, conflict, arms race,
All the news this morning.
Wall Street, unemployment, economy,
All the business news this morning.
rain, shine, hurricanes,
All the weather this morning.
baseball, football, racing.
All the sports. ABC News This Morning, just before Good Morning America with David Hartman and Joan London. What you need to know as you begin your day. ABC News This Morning, uniquely qualified to bring you the world.
Medicine packages don't have alarms to tell you when to take them, or retrieving arms to keep you from taking too many, or automatic dispensers to keep you from taking too few. They don't have gimmicks. Instead, they have something much simpler and better: the label directions. Before you take any medicine, read the label, because medicines can't help you if you don't take them right.
One of the issues that has been talked about a great deal during the campaign, particularly by the Democrats, is Social Security. Candidates have learned to approach that in fear and trembling, because any suggestion that they might wish to tamper with Social Security can produce a tremendous backlash of reaction. But Social Security has been an issue in this campaign, even though almost everybody admits in their candid moments that something has to be done to reform the system in order to make it solvent in the future. Max Robinson at our computer center in New York has some data on just how Social Security has affected this election. Max, what have you learned?
Frank, an interesting shift revealed by our ABC exit polls today. Last February, 46% of those over 60 years old said they lean toward Democratic candidates. Today, the day that counts, 53% of the same older voters identified themselves as Democrats. Not surprisingly, today's polls show that voters over 60 name Social Security more often than any other age group as the nation's most important problem. And those older voters went for Democrats by nearly a 2-to-1 margin. One final note. Earlier, we talked about how Senator William Proxmire, the Democrat in Wisconsin, won big despite the fact he didn't spend a cent on his campaign. Well, it just so happens that Senator Proxmire got 50% of the voters who said they were for Ronald Reagan, according to our exit polls. That is to say, Senator Proxmire, who is hardly a Reagan supporter, was making deep inroads in Reagan support in Wisconsin. Gentlemen?
Max, thank you. I have a message for the ABC stations from coast to coast, and it is that we are going to continue here beyond 1:30 Eastern Time. How much beyond, I don't know, but beyond 1:30. So make your plans accordingly. Now, we've been seeing some figures. This, as we know, has been the biggest spending off-year election in the history of the United States, which means the history of the world. I am not sure that spending correlates with victory too accurately. Have you got some figures there, Frank?
Well, I don't know that that conclusion can be drawn, David. The biggest spender of all, as far as the Senate, well, is that sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. A great deal depends on the candidate and the issues. For example, Lerman in New York, he spent more money than anybody else running for governor, except for Clements in Texas. They both lost. They both lost. They both lost not because of the money that they spent, but undoubtedly because of other issues, although they both put up very good races. And the money certainly enabled Lerman to become well-known and to give Mario Cuomo a good battle. As far as the Senate is concerned, the biggest spender was Mark Dayton, the man in Minnesota, the department store heir, as everybody describes him. He spent, well, $5.5 million, and he lost. The next biggest spender was Pete Wilson, the Republican in California, and he won. And the next biggest spender after him was Jerry Brown, the Democrat in California, and he lost. Some of the things that are interesting, though, are the amount of money spent by people who really didn't have all that much to worry about. Pat Moynihan, for example, spent more than $2 million in New York, and Florence Sullivan, the Assemblywoman, I believe spent less than $100,000 in opposing him.
She couldn't raise any money.
Gentlemen, I hope we can pick up on this theme in a moment because I've got a couple of lists here, but our coverage of the 82 vote will continue right after this.
Wednesday. No! An ancient tomb holds a deadly curse.
Sounds pretty far-fetched.
In a place where time stands still.
They think Jack's a god.
So does Jack.
And human sacrifice is real.
Jake!
On the tails of the gold monkey. Then, while Jody's the bait, Colt's on the prowl for a beautiful burglar.
Are you up to your old tricks?
But she's double the trouble.
It's too dangerous.
Because she's got a twin. On the Fall Guy.
More children in this country are killed and crippled from car crashes than any disease. We have a cure. Seat belts.
Got a couple of lists here that I want to read you very quickly. These are the top labor political action recipients. We're talking here in the neighborhood of $250,000 to a low of $161,000. Sarbanes, 1. Byrd, 1. Regal, 1. Brown lost, Metzenbaum, 1. Sasser, 1. Burdick, 1. Kennedy, 1. Fithian, 1. Fithian lost, Mitchell, 1. So you've got 2 losers, and you've got about 10 winners there, and the same is true of business Political Action Committee recipients. Money has certainly helped. That's the national election picture at 22 minutes after the hour, and we'll be back.
Now here's more from Tom Jarrow.
Out west, Victor Utia has done his job for the GOP tonight. The Republican governor of Oregon has won re-election to a second term. Victor Utia, we are projecting by a comfortable margin in his race in Oregon to a second term. And ABC's Ken Kashiwahara is standing by now with a report on the race for the Oregon gubernatorial contest. Ken?
Tom, Governor Vic Utia is a Republican who supported Ronald Reagan 2 years ago, but who managed to overcome the issue of Reaganomics. A couple of months ago, the polls showed the race here very close, and the White House reportedly considered it would lose the governorship. Utia's Democratic opponent, State Senator Ted Kulongoski, attempted to make Reaganomics an issue, but Utia pointed out that Utia had nothing to do with the recession and that he had even criticized Reagan's economic policies earlier this year. Utia poured a lot of money into this campaign, and he managed to paint Kulongoski as dangerous and as a threat to business. All this at a time when Oregon's unemployment rate is above the national average, and at a time when Oregon is attempting to attract new business here. So in the end, Democrat Kulongoski simply failed to convince voters that he would make any difference in Oregon's future economic policies, and Utia managed to convince voters that they should put their future hopes in him and that they should stay the course with him. Tom?
Ken, thank you. Also tonight in the Southwest, only one Republican was defeated in his bid for re-election. That was in the state of New Mexico, where Harrison Smith, a former astronaut, was defeated by Jeff Bingaman. Harrison Smith was a former astronaut who, as we say, will soon become a former United States Senator. And for a report from that headquarters, here is Dennis Trout. Dennis?
Tom, the victory of Jeff Bingaman over Jack Smith in the New Mexican Senate race seems to be more a reflection of local issues than of national ones. Polls taken here suggest that campaign tactics chiefly television ads run by Senator Schmidt played the largest role in changing the nature of this race. Without going into great detail, it can be shown that Schmidt's ads inaccurately criticized Bingaman's performance as state attorney general. New Mexican voters blame Schmidt for what they saw as dirty tactics. That happened just a week ago. Most polls at the time were showing Schmidt something in the realm of 10 points ahead then. Now it appears he's lost, chiefly on the issue of campaign tactics. Tom?
Dennis, thank you, and we'll have more ABC News election coverage in just a moment.
Primetime football's back. The greatest American hero, Friday at 9, 8 Central and Mountain.
I bought this by mail. They said it would grow hair. See any hair?
The ad said this gadget would save gas. It did. Now my car won't start.
They said I could make money stuffing envelopes. I think I got taken.
Most of the time when you shop by mail, you get what you were promised. But if you don't and suspect mail fraud, call your postal inspector or local postmaster. It's our job to fight mail fraud.
We'll give those envelope guys a licking.
Don't take getting taken.
Abscam and the scandal that involved that particular FBI investigation cost New Jersey one of its senior citizens. Harrison Williams, a Democrat who had been there many years, resigned because of the Abscam matter. That, of course, opened up that seat, and it was held tonight by Democrats. Frank Lautenberg is projected as the winner by ABC News. He apparently has won by a very narrow margin. And Bob Clark has a report on this candidate.
Before he got into the New Jersey Senate race, Frank Lautenberg was best known as a political philanthropist, a soft touch for liberal causes. The millionaire head of a computer firm spent more than $2.5 million of his own money on his own cause in his winning campaign. He came from far behind to overtake Millicent Fenwick, thought to be unbeatable.
We have to prepare ourselves, both economically, socially, for the kinds of life that we're going to be enjoying in this state, in this country in the years ahead, and it needs
The Democratic candidate made jobs the major issue of his campaign. The 58-year-old liberal gave $90,000 to George McGovern's losing campaign for president in 1972. This year, he backed the winner.
It's an old political axiom that whoever controls the state houses, the various gubernatorial positions around the country, has a very powerful political base, the party that controls those state houses. Today's elections left Democrats with a decisive edge in the gubernatorialships. Let's take a look at some of the results. Democrats entered the election with 27 governorships to 23 for the Republicans. Here are some of the winners that we have posted for tonight. In today's elections, Democrats gained 5 more governorships. If these returns continue to hold up, the Democrats will control state houses in 32 states to 18 for the Republicans, better than a 3-2 margin. The impact of all that Democratic power in the state houses would be felt in the elections in the near future, especially the presidential elections, 1984. Our election coverage for tonight will continue in a moment.
Wednesdays.
Someone's taken my grandson.
It's a full-scale, all-points manhunt.
I know nothing about it.
I'll kill you.
You put the cops on me. Me.
She's gone.
Claudia?
How much do you want for my son?
On Dynasty.
Think lunch. Okay, all you seafood lovers, what comes to mind? A shrimp salad? Maybe a broiled fillet? Well, why not shrimp scampi? Or tasty oysters? At Red Lobster, you can have that for lunch. Sure. How about cold-boiled shrimp? Or just about anything that comes to a seafood lover's mind. Got you thinking about lunch? Come on.
Red Lobster for the seafood lover in you.
Sleeping with the radio on.
Charlie McLean for Lux Beans.
Isn't it great when you discover that an old friend has talents you never knew about? Like Lux Beans.
I've always loved the taste, but I've just learned Lux is really nutritious. Up to 3 times more protein than rice or potatoes. All natural, too. Good nutrition never tasted better. Lux Country-Style Beans.
150 people working to win you over. ABC News resumes its coverage of the 82 vote from our election center in Washington.
All right, good evening, good morning, I should say. It's 1:30 in the morning here in the East on the day after the election, and there are still some races that are not decided, particularly the one in Illinois. Well, there are more than one in Illinois, but the governor's race is the one we're going to concentrate on at the moment. Look at this, with 78% of the precincts in, Stevenson, 52%, the incumbent Republican Jim Thompson with 48%. Now, more than 2 million votes have been cast. There's only, well, there's not much in the way of an outstanding vote. It's evenly divided, we understand, between both Chicago and what they call downstate in Illinois, which is practically any place outside of Chicago. So it's very difficult to determine at this point just where this vote will come and how it will break when it finally does come in. But at the moment, Stevenson is leading. However, despite the fact that we've got 78% of the vote in, we can't call it. They're being pretty cautious and concerned at both headquarters of Stevenson and of Governor Thompson. We want to go out to Chicago now to Ron Miller, our correspondent, who was in the Thompson headquarters. Ron?
Well, Frank, actually, it's more than caution and concern here at Thompson's headquarters. It's shock. They expected the governor to walk all over former Senator Stevenson. In fact, they expected him to be coming down here to make a greeting to his well-wishers here, and in fact, a victory speech more than 2.5 hours ago. This was supposed to be a cakewalk. It appeared that the Thompson campaign was impervious to national economics, even though the state has almost an unemployment rate of 13%. It didn't seem to be cutting into the Thompson campaign, but somehow it's changed. Thompson's people told me that their private polls, as recently as yesterday, showed the governor ahead by almost 20 percentage points. But as you know now, that's changed. No one particularly knows why. What they are waiting for is the Collier County, as it's called, vote to come in, DuPage Lake, some of the strong support areas for Governor Thompson. That may be enough to pull it out. But clearly there is shock here in the ballroom and most of all up in Thompson headquarters. While everyone is saying that Governor Thompson has been looking forward to Springfield, an unprecedented third term there, a lot of people here have been thinking actually that he's been looking forward to Washington, far ahead of the next 4 years that he expected to win easily in Springfield. Frank?
Thank you, Ron. Well, of course, he never really denied that perhaps the call to higher office would be made and he would possibly hear it. Thompson is one of those classic politicians. He came to fame by being a prosecutor who threw Democrats into the slammer, mainly members of Dick Daley's Democratic machine there in Chicago. And, of course, he also prosecuted a former governor of Illinois. We can give you a little bit of information about the vote that is still not reported. We can't get a handle on of our key precincts, the ones that will tell us, should tell us, really what's going to happen there in Illinois. We're missing only 4 in Chicago, 2 in Rock Island, the rest in some small towns and townships around the Chicago area, but also some in southern Illinois, Jacksonville, Herron, West Marion, and Franklin, places like that. So it's very difficult at this point to say just who's going to emerge triumphant in this contest, and nobody can pick a winner. David?
One thing Adlai Stevenson lacks is what his father did in vetoing a bill that was supposed to restrict cats from roaming the streets at night. Do you remember that?
Oh, it was one of the greatest messages ever written, and it was one of the funniest things. And of course, what you're saying is that young Adlai, doesn't quite have the sense of humor that his father had.
What was it he said? It's in the nature of cats to roam at night, and what else? Do you remember any more of it than I do?
It's in the nature of cats to roam at night, and he compared it to Republican newspapers going after Democrats, just as dogs go after cats.
Well, we will may or may not find out tonight who won in Illinois, but we will do our best. In the meantime, we want to keep up to date on the votes on the nuclear referenda in California and numerous other states and numerous other cities and counties. Lynn Scher, who is our national reporter, reporting from the West, has been keeping up with that. Lynn, what's happened?
David,
so far, these votes are very, very slow in coming in. But so far, as we can tell, of the 9 states where the nuclear freeze is on the ballot, we believe that it will pass in at least 6 of them. Massachusetts, Michigan, Montana, New Jersey, Oregon, and Rhode Island. At the moment, it looks as if it will not pass in Arizona. There is some question about what is happening in North Dakota, and as for here in California, at the moment that one is too close to call. We've been talking all along about whether is this a referendum on Mr. Reagan and the presidency and all of that. If you are looking for a White House victory, at least the closeness of this nuclear freeze issue here in California is such a thing. As you remember, Harold Willens, the founder of the movement here in California, talking to me earlier, pointing out that they were way ahead, almost 30 points in the polls, until the White House decided to put a concentrated effort against it here in California. When they did that, they brought in their big guns, and all of a sudden it's neck and neck right down to the finish line. We should have results later on, and we'll keep you posted. In any event, the other point is that the nuclear freeze does not seem to have cut particularly strongly on the yes side for some of the candidates who were running with it. Jerry Brown, big nuclear freeze proponent. Tom Bradley, big nuclear freeze proponent. This did not bring the voters out on their side that they were hoping for.
Lynn, can we ask you a question about another proposition on the ballot there? What about Prop 15 and the gun control? Any word on how that's faring?
Yeah, we are not tracking it with our ABC News Network information, but the local information here is that did not pass. That the gun control issue. No, that again, I am quoting to you from other sources here. This is not our own polls, but our information is that that's not going to make it.
Well, that's one that did have nationwide ramifications, because if it had passed in California, a gun control law of that kind, inevitably forced the Supreme Court to confront that basic question about just who is the citizen who has the right to bear arms. Is he a member of the National Guard, or is he just any citizen at all?
Well, among those opposing it was Charlton Heston, who is something of a presence in California. He's played the President of the United States 3 times and Moses once, and he was opposed to the gun control.
Moses is against gun control?
No, Charlton Heston is opposed.
Moses is against gun control.
Well, I'll take your word for it. Our coverage of the 82 vote will continue after this.
Thursday.
I can't believe it's you.
Luis's friend falls for Chachi.
Do you think I'm trying to seduce you? You better back off, bucko.
Joni loves Chachi. Then Rossetti becomes a talk show hero, star of the family. And Muriel wants to repeat her wedding vows.
This isn't a sad moment.
Look who's standing next to you.
Too close for comfort. Then Sam has a problem.
A beginning impotent. I could hit something.
It takes 2.
Joey was an abused child. At 12 years old, he ran away from home 3 times. At 17, he was spending all night on the street. At 21, he committed his first armed robbery. At 25, he was serving 15 years in prison. Joey was an abused child, and that abused childhood influenced what happened to him later. Yet, child abuse can be prevented. Help us get to the heart of the problem. Help us prevent child abuse.
Along with that gubernatorial race in Illinois that we have not been able to call, we have still not been able to call the race for Bob Michael in the 18th Congressional District in Illinois. There's the race as it stands right now, and as you can see, it is 50-50, barely 2,000 votes separating Michael and his Democratic competition. It is almost beyond belief that the man who is the Senate Minority Leader, and who really is such a powerful figure here in Washington, is having so much trouble in his own home district. But as Charles Gibson tells us, that in fact is the way it is.
Bob Michael may be the most powerful Republican in the House, but in his own district it has seemed as if he's been powerless this year to stop the economic bad times.
Ron, how you doing? Good, Bob. How are you? Well, I'm trying to get by.
But people in the district have a hard time getting by. Caterpillar Tractor, the district's major employer, laid off 9,000 workers because of depressed farm conditions and declining exports. The president's pipeline sanctions cost more jobs. Then Caterpillar took a strike that idled all its plant workers. And other industries have pulled out. Pabst, for many years, was pumping out blue ribbons from Peoria. No more. Couple all that with low farm prices and a high number of farm foreclosures, and all of a sudden Michael started looking vulnerable. His opponent, Douglas Stevens, a 31-year-old political novice, came out of nowhere to contention.
He chose to represent the Republican Party, the interests in Washington, over the interests of his own district.
There's an exceptional problem, I think, this time in the sense that that visibility for me personally isn't so much personal anymore because it's tied directly with the president and his policies and the leadership role in the Congress, and so those are the fortunes and vicissitudes of politics.
House Minority Leader Bob Michael is in fact now standing by at his headquarters in Peoria, Illinois. Congressman, talk about the vicissitudes of politics. Who would have thought? There you've been in Congress for 26 years and you're having trouble holding your own district. You called yourself the winner earlier on. We have not been able to confirm that with our own projections. On what are you basing victory?
Well, we're basing it upon the historical pattern of the vote, particularly in Peoria County, where the big precincts in the bluff areas are the last to report, and frankly would be those that would vote overwhelmingly for me rather than my opponent. The earlier votes that come in the Peoria area are those in the Valley wards where I'm traditionally run behind, and so we're basing our we have a cushion out there, but we'll build it with those additional precincts being reported.
Let me just read you a little statistical information here. Of the House Reagan supporters, that is those in the House who have voted with the president 70% of the time, 96 have been running, 83 have been projected winners. I mention that to you only because some people thought you might have been making a mistake in bringing the president out to your district. You think he helped or hurt?
Oh, I have no regrets in having the president invited out here. After all, I'm associated very closely with him in my leadership role and as personal friends, and I think he did a great deal to stimulate interest out here in our campaign. Frankly, I might very well have lost if he hadn't come, because the folks on our side, the Republican members out there who normally think, well, Bob's got another race, so what? He'll win handily, and didn't realize that there was this brand new district of 60% new geography, 45% new people, and the fact that all this burden from unemployment, sanctions, and low farm prices and all the rest could make us vulnerable. So I'm grateful that we've won, and I'm not going to apologize at all for having had the president out here, and I think he learned something in the course of his visit coming out here.
Congressman Michael, there are now some indications that the sanctions that have been placed against our European allies, that there's some kind of a deal may be worked out indeed in the next week or so, and you're looking you're looking a little glum over that. Was there any chance that deal might have been worked out before today, before yesterday?
Oh, I don't know, and frankly, if it would have been, and maybe announced just a day or two before the election, I think that'd be such a crass political move that it would have lost its effectiveness so far as helping me, helping our race is concerned. But I would like to see it, frankly, come whenever it comes, and the sooner the better, because frankly, all along we felt that those sanctions imposed unilaterally were not doing us any good, that unless we were joined in with our allies, only then could we hope to make some impact upon the Soviet Union. So I think, frankly, the message has gotten across to the president and the administration, and that we'll probably see some kind of change. But the problem here for us is that the damage has been done. The Soviets have turned to Komatsu in Japan for a good share of what we normally would have been able to sell them right out of Peoria and plants here in the Illinois area. So it may be one of those long-term kind of things. It'll take us a long time to come back and repair the damage.
Let me just get back to a couple of quick political questions. Question number one, we're projecting roughly 20 to 25 lost seats in the House for Republicans, so you'll have 20 or 25 more Democrats in there. How impossible is that going to make your task in terms of bringing a coalition together?
Well, it will be more difficult, obviously. Now, bear in mind that some of those Democrats who will be coming into the Congress as new ones will be from southern states rather than up north, which would suggest that their philosophical bent might be a bit more conservative than those whom they're replacing. And I think we'll have to take a good look at just who is who in that new Congress, and I'm an eternal optimist. I'd like to think that we might very well still put together some act If not, we'll still give them a good run for their money on some critical issues in the new Congress.
Congressman Michael, thanks very much. It may warm your heart a little to know that Tip O'Neill, in his own way, I think, is pulling for you.
Oh, thank you very much, Ted.
All right, thanks a lot.
Thank you. The deal on the pipeline that you were talking about, Ted, as you know, might very well have helped him in this election had it been done a few days before, but it was held up by the French. So if he had lost, he could blame it on the French.
That wouldn't be much help to them, would it? Or much comfort?
No, not a whole lot.
He really was placed in an impossible situation. There he is, a staunch supporter of the president, and yet he had to go in and argue with the president. As a matter of fact, he made public a letter that he wrote to the president about the pipeline business.
We've got to go, Frank, to get a report from our national correspondent who's been watching over the South, and that's Jim Wood. Jim?
Good evening, David. Well, it's been a long night here. We're in the Tribble Victory Room. There used to be a lot of folks here that were very happy. They've all gone home. We're here, and I want to look at something right now that may be a measure of just how popular the president is down in the South. There were 12 Republican freshman congressmen who were running tonight. That is, they were elected in 1980 on Reagan's coattails. They were running by themselves tonight. Of those 12 freshman Republican, 7 won and 5 lost. I'd like to take a look at 3 particular races. In the Alabama 6th Congressional District, which is Birmingham, the Republican Albert Lee Smith, who was a moral majoritarian, who won in 1980, lost tonight to County Commissioner Ben Erdreich, who was who was very much a liberal, a Yale-educated lawyer, and the son-in-law of one of Alabama's best-known labor lawyers. In the South Carolina 6th, John Napier, who was also a freshman Republican, lost to Robert Talon. Now, Reaganomics was a big issue in that district. Black votes were also a factor. They did come out. They did vote. That's John Ginret's old district, and Napier took it from Ginret after Ginret had been indicted on the abscam charges. In the West Virginia 3rd Congressional District, which is Charleston, the capital city, Bob Wise, who's a Democrat and a pro-labor liberal, plainly labeled himself that, was running against David Michael Staten, who's a Republican who won in 1980 for the first time. That was the first time a Republican had represented that district in 50 years. Well, tonight, Bob Wise defeated David Michael Staten. Mr. Staten had told his constituents that God had called him and Ronald Reagan to lead the country. I don't know what we can read into the results of that race. Down in Alabama, it isn't a freshman Republican race, but it is an interesting one. In Alabama's 2nd District, the former press secretary to Governor George Wallace, Billy Joe Camp, was running for Congress tonight. I remember we used to kid Mr. Camp about his congressional ambitions, and we asked the governor about it on one presidential campaign, and Wallace said of Mr. Camp, he couldn't lead a one-car funeral. Apparently George Wallace was right, because Billy Joe Camp lost tonight to a veteran Republican, Bill Dickinson. Gentlemen?
Thank you. I always enjoy the political news in the South.
Let me tell you, Billy Joe Camp once led me to the best barbecue joint in Alabama. So he rates very high in my estimation, even though he lost tonight.
Worth a vote. You live there.
Yeah, sure.
What politician has done more for you? I have been asked now to tell our ABC affiliates and coast to coast that this will be our last half hour. So you can, at that time, if you so choose, you can turn out the lights, sweep up, and go home. Our coverage of the 82 vote will continue in 2 minutes after this.
Wednesday. An ancient tomb holds a deadly curse and a human sacrifice. On the tails of the gold monkey, and cults on the prowl for a beautiful burglar.
Are you up to your old tricks?
And she's double trouble. She's got a twin, the fall guy. Then,
I'll kill you.
It's a full-scale search for a kidnapper.
Put the cops on me. Me.
How much do you want for my son?
On Dynasty.
Old Mother Hubbard went to the cupboard to get her poor stomach a pill, but when she got there, found bottles to spare from other times she'd been ill. There were capsules, potions, drugs for emotions prescribed by a dozen physicians. Some were her brothers, some borrowed from others who had almost the same conditions. I'll throw it all out, she said with a shout. My doctor's advice I will follow. I'll take only those pills prescribed for my ills and use my head before I swallow.
College football on ABC. Almost 20 years, over 20 reasons. College spirit, outstanding performances, leadership and legends, excellence, great moments, excitement, fast-paced plays, offense and on target, triumphs and bungles, action and more action, long passes, late defensive stands, objectives and nail-biting endings, anticipation, bullish determination, and celebration. NCAA football and ABC, a winning team.
I've been called a lot of things in my time, like Old Blue Eyes and chairman of the board, but the one I'm most proud of is chairman of the National Multiple Sclerosis Society campaign chairman, which means that I'm raising the dollars for research to find a cure for MS and to help patients today. Why me? I've got a best friend who has it. I was his best man at his wedding. He can't walk anymore now, and he's only 35. I'd like to make good in this chairman job. I really would. Would you help me?
Well, we're winding down, or running down, or falling down. Anyway, we're coming to the end of what has been a long and a most interesting evening. Only one Senate race still out, and that is the one in Nevada with Senator Howard Cannon, the Democratic incumbent, in a tough race. The missing precincts that we would like to know about are all in Las Vegas, and both the candidates, Chick Heck and Senator Cannon, are from Las Vegas, so it's very difficult for us at this point to know how that's going to turn out. And there are 4 governorships still undecided: Alaska, Idaho, Nebraska, and of course Illinois. Illinois is the big one that so close, more than 2 million votes cast, almost all the votes counted, and still people can't decide who's going to win. David?
Why do you suppose they're so slow counting the votes in Las Vegas? Do you think they're occupied with something else?
They may well be. They will be.
It just occurs to me we are a few days past the Spanish elections, and while they were, after all, voting for a prime minister, which is a bigger race for them than this one is for us, nevertheless more than 70% of all Spaniards turned out. They don't have a whole lot of experience in democracy. I've just been handed a card that indicates that even though the weather here on the East Coast was beautiful today, and I have no reason to believe it was bad around the rest of the country, about 35% of the eligible American public turned out, which is about the same as in 1978, the last midterm election that we had. I don't know what that says about us, except that perhaps we don't hold democracy quite as dear as we ought to. In terms of
maybe we're accustomed to it. Maybe we're accustomed to it. We don't expect it to be taken away from us. Don't expect it to lose it at the ballot box anyway, I guess.
I think that's true, because it's been in the 30 percentages over the last 2 or 3 or 4 off-year elections.
Well, let us not leave people on an uncertain note. Someone has just told me in my ear that Bob Michael, whom we have been waiting to project all evening, one way or the other, and who told us he was going to win, knew what he was talking about. ABC News has just projected Bob Michael, the House Minority Leader, as the winner in the 18th Congressional District in Illinois, and I suppose that's as fitting a way to end this evening as any other.
Well, I think we cannot possibly do it in the time remaining to us, but we owe a great debt of thanks to a lot of people, some of whom we'll try to name: our national correspondents, Lynn Scher, Richard Threlkeld, and Sandy Van Oker, and James Wooten, Max Robinson in New York, Bob Clark, Charlie Gibson, Britt Hume, Barry Serafin here in Washington, our panelists of experts and analysts, Sam Donaldson, Barbara Walters, George Will, and Tom Wicker. And also, of course, I would like to say that I think all of us here agree that we could not possibly do this, whatever we have done here tonight, without the help of literally thousands of people, not only in Washington and New York, other places like that, but all over the country, who have pitched in and worked very, very hard, some of them for years, so that we could bring you the results tonight and report this election as we have. So, David, been good working with you. Ted?
Thank you, Frank.
Nice to see you up bright and early, so early in the morning.
That's all for now. Time has run out. I promised the stations we'd get out so they could get out, so I'm going to keep our promise. Thank you very much for being with us. We have enjoyed it. and we'll see you again soon. Good night.
comprehensive recap of all the election results, watch a special edition of This Morning later at 6 a.m. Then Good Morning America continues the vote analysis. This has been a special events presentation of ABC News.